الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا وحبيبنا حبيب إله العالمين محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نون والقلم وما يسطرون ما أنت بنعمة ربك بمجنون وإن لك لأجرا غير ممنون وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم. These verses are related to the great character of the Prophet, peace be on him, and the ajr and reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reserving for him for the day of judgment and also in this world. Tonight, as you know, is the eve of the Wafat of both the Prophet, peace be on him, and his grandson Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. And certainly commemorating the reminder, having a reminder for ourselves of the life and manners of these two great human beings, great creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would uplift our own character in a way that inshallah Allah will be pleased with us. Talking about the Prophet, peace be on him, is very difficult, because although he is a human like us, he has superseded all humans and all angels. And although in appearance, in creation, he is equal with us, but in his heart and in the degrees that he attained with regards to nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is very far away from us. And therefore, whatever we say about him cannot explain the degree that he deserves and the qualities that he were given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that he attained in this world. To get some rough idea about his position and his station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these beginning verses of Surah Al-Qalam are very helpful. The verses start with a qasam. Allah swears by some very elevated things which of course are not quite familiar for us, and that is al-qalam wa ma yasturun, the qalam, the pen, and what it writes. These are the first creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with which he decreed everything. Now, why Allah swears by these two things, or probably three things? Noon, which is the ink by which Allah has written the whole creation. And this is of course a metaphorical type of language. And qalam, which of course with the help of that ink is wrote whatever was going to be created. And whatever it is written on, which is lawh, of course, al-lawh al-mahfuz. When Allah wants to show steps of creation and then mentions the Prophet, as if when I was going to start this creation, the ultimate aim of that was you, or someone like you, or those who trained by you. Well, you can put it in any way, in any language, in any word that you want to put it. But ultimately, what I wanted to attain, I stress this is our language, Allah, the actual steps of creation, and then mentions the Prophet, as if when I was going to start this creation, the ultimate aim of that was you, or someone like you, or those who trained by you. Well, you can put it in any way, in any language, in any word that you want to put it. But ultimately, what I wanted to attain, I stress, this is our language. Allah doesn't need to attain anything. This is our language we are using about Him. That what I wanted to attain at the end, it was someone like you and those who are trained by you. Because anyone trained by the Prophet certainly would go to Jannah, and Allah, we know, has created us for Jannah, not for Jahannam. Jahannam is just a side effect of this world. Allah has created all of us for Jannah, for the paradise. So it was you. ما أنت بنعمة ربك بمجنون. With the grace of your Lord, with the favor of your Lord, you are not Majnoon. Now, Majnoon has different meanings. One of the meanings is someone who's covered, who's concealed, who's hidden. Well, this explanation I would like very much. Of course, there are many other explanations. With the favor, with the grace of your Lord, you are not hidden. Completely now everyone knows you. In the world of the angels, in the heavens, on the earth, and especially those who want to follow you. And since you have revealed whatever I wanted to reveal to human beings, إِنَّ لَكَ لَأَجْرًا غَيْرَ مَمْنُونٍ. There is an unceasing reward for you. Well, this is very hope-giving when we think about how Allah treats His sincere servants. إِنَّ لَكَ لَأَجْرًا غَيْرَ مَمْنُونٍ. There is an unceasing reward for you. We cannot imagine what Allah is going to give to the prophets in Jannah or wherever he goes. Unceasing means that not that we just give you something and you live with it forever. It means it always increases. It always comes from the fadl and grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That reward always pours down on you. Now, if you just think about this verse of Surah Ahzab, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. Allah and His angels. Now, salawat from Allah and His angels is turning to someone with mercy. Of course, because Allah doesn't make dua for someone. Because we make dua for someone to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah doesn't make dua for someone. He turns with mercy to someone when He wants to say salawat on someone. Allah and His angels turn with mercy to you, to the Prophet. And so we are ordered to do the same thing by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to turn with mercy to Him, to say salawat. Salawat is, when we say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, it means that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to turn to them with His mercy. Now, you might say, why do they need that? Why should we make a prayer for them? This is the unceasing reward. Every salawat that we send, it would turn, it would change to a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which reaches the Prophet. This is what Allah has decreed Himself, that everyone should do that. His angels do that. It's very interesting. All the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they mention the Prophet. This is the Quran, this is not Hadith. They mention the Prophet and they ask for mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for him. What has he done? Now this is what we have to investigate. What has he done to deserve such a position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That every angel. There's a very nice hadith. Someone asked Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. That I find a contradiction in the Quran. And Imam said, what is that contradiction? He said in the Quran, it mentions that the angels, they day and night they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they glorify Him. يُسَبِّحُونَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارِ. Morning, evening, day, night, they glorify Allah. لَا يَفْتُرُونَ. They are never tired of that. They don't do anything else. They just glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, this is one verse in the Quran. يُسَبِّحُونَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارِ لَا يَفْتُرُونَ. And then another verse, the verse which we just mentioned, says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ. If they are glorifying Allah all the time, when they will send salawat to the Prophet, when they find time to ask Allah for the mercy to come to the Prophet, peace be on him. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq said, don't you know that sending salawat to the Prophet is regarded as tasbih in itself? It is really. I mean, when the angels are ordered to ask for the mercy of God, to ask God to turn with His mercy to the Prophet, they are actually making a glorification of God. And what does this tell us? This tells us that if a person is totally sincere and submits himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah makes him like as his own relative, so to speak. Of course, this is the wrong word to use. As someone who has some specific position, that even when you mention them, you have remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do we say remembering A'imma, mentioning A'imma alayhimus salam, is tantamount to remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because they are so near, so close, that as soon as you remember them, you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't we have this hadith about an alim, that al-alim, a true scholar of religion, is someone man yudhakkirukumullah ru'yatuh, the one whom when you see them, when you look at them, you are reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, if we say this about an alim, what about our a'imma? What about the Prophet, peace be on him? There's no difference. Now, one more thing is mentioned here, which is very important. إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are of magnificent khuluq. Khuluq is a manner, acquired manner, which becomes so inherent for a human being, which becomes like an inherent nature, a natural character. Your natural character, your khuluq, is huge, is magnificent. This is what is mentioned about the Prophet in the Quran. Now, khuluq and akhlaq are the same thing. The akhlaq of the Prophet is commended in the Quran. And, of course, akhlaq is the most important thing for every Muslim. The most important thing in the life of a Muslim, of course, there is ibadah, there is worship, there is devotion. But just as important as this is akhlaq. The Prophet said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been given the mission to complete the nobility of character in human beings. Makarim are the noble types of akhlaq that a person could have. I have come to complete this for you. Anything which is regarded as a good manner, as a good akhlaq, should be regarded as Islamic. And vice versa. Anything which is not a good manner is not Islamic manner. And I tell you, there is one hadith which is very amazing. It tells that with your husnul khulq, with your good manner, with your good akhlaq, good disposition, you can attain the reward of a person who fasts all his days and prays all his nights. This shows that a good akhlaq and character is very important in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a person with bad character and with lots of worship could not be really regarded as a complete and perfect Muslim. A perfect Muslim, of course, is the one who has developed his own manner and akhlaq, and a person who has developed of course, his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of worship and other things. These go hand in hand with each other. Good akhlaq and good relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala go hand in hand. The better, the nearer to Allah one becomes, the better their character towards people would become. The kinder they become to us, other people, like the Prophet. This is why he's told you are of khuluqun azim. You have very great character. Now, I tell you, prophets passed all limits that a creature could ever attain in terms of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not even Jibreel, not even Israfil, which is the greatest angel nearest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, could attain that position which our Prophet attained by going to Mi'raj and getting near and near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeing the signs of Allah in the Sidratul Muntaha. Sidratul Muntaha, Sidra is the lotus tree. Well, they say this is the final tree in Jannah, from which all the favors and barakat of Jannah comes. Well, this is of course a metaphor, and beyond which no human, no angel, no one has ever went. The veils of dignity, of glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not let anyone to get nearer. But the Prophet even passed that position. Still he comes on this earth. He talks to you and me, well, in his own time, to illiterate people, to uneducated people, to rude folks as an equal. This is khuluqun azim, isn't it? Most of us are thinking about ourselves. We just want to purify our own souls. We just want to attain a closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if someone is better than us in that respect, we feel jealous. We don't want anyone to be better than us. And if we have a knowledge that makes others better than us, we don't want to propagate it. Because that then would take the speciality that we have. With the Prophet, you look, he came down from that position to teach all human beings, to bring that mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to everyone. I tell you an interesting thing. There is a hadith which mentions there are some angels Allah has created, who are called al-mala'ikatul walihun. They are completely absorbed angels, in the sense that they see the glory of God and they are so absorbed that they cannot do anything else. They even don't know that Allah has created anything. Don't know that. They're completely absorbed with the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are some angels like Jibreel, like Mikael, although they know that glory, they see that glory, still they work for Allah's creatures. With His order, with His command. They can do it. So they are higher. We had some mystics in the past. Maybe we have them now. They are absorbed mystics. Urafa'ul majzubin. Majzub. They are absorbed in the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are some instances of this in history, that as soon as that glory was revealed to them, they couldn't talk to anyone anymore. To the end of their life, they didn't talk to anyone. They didn't understand what was going around them. They were so absorbed in the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there were some mystics. Although they had that absorption, they could come and talk to others as well. Which one is better? Those who are totally absorbed, not seeing others. Those angels who are totally absorbed, not knowing that even Allah has created anything beside them. Or those angels like Jibreel and Israfil and Mikael. Those mystics who are totally absorbed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or those who come and talk to others about that glory. Certainly the second. The latter are important. And this is the position of Prophet. He reached a position that no human and no angel ever had reached that position. Still he came to us, spoke to us as an equal. And in a way that people thought that he is really like them. They treated him as an equal. And this is what Prophet wanted actually, with that great knowledge. This is khuluqun azim, isn't it? You have the great, huge, magnificent character. When Allah commends someone like that, Allah has commended lots of prophets in the Quran. For example, about Ayub, he says, "Inna wajadnahu sabiran." We found him very patient, very enduring. "Innahu ni'mal abd, innahu awwab." What a good servant he was. He commends Ibrahim alayhi salam, "Inna Ibrahim la halimun awwahum munib." Ibrahim was very enduring, very patient with Allah's servants. Halim. Awwah, all the time calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Munib, going to him all the time. But he has not commended anyone like this, as he has commended the Prophet. "Innaka la'ala khuluqin azim." You are of magnificent character. And now, I tell you, we are taught to follow the character of the prophets. Can we do that? Well, we might not be able to do that, but we know that Allah has favored us with a role model, with whom He has not favored anyone like him upon any other ummah. You might say, what's the difference between religion of Islam and other religions? All are ways to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's the difference between Christianity and Islam? And I tell you, the type of tawheed that the Prophet talks about is not given in previous religions. The names of Allah mentioned in the Quran are not mentioned in previous books. Not as elaborate as it could. This is why usually the scholars say the things revealed to the prophets of Islam, although he put it in very simple terms, they cannot be equaled by anything revealed to any other prophets. And it's true. You cannot see any book like the Quran. Although all the books of Allah are light, are nur, are knowledge, are wisdom, but you cannot see anything like the Quran, talking in this clear term about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if as a Muslim, I tell you, as a Christian, someone wants to explain what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't think until the end of the world Christians can say what is God. Because this concept of Trinity, of course this concept of Trinity has come in, has added to the calamity. But even before that, telling what is God, this is something very complicated. Now, I ask you as a Muslim, what is God? قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Ahad is different from wahid. Wahid is one. Okay, ahad means someone whom is in his own internal being, has no limits whatsoever. That's why he's ahad. Otherwise he would have been two. If there was limit, there was the other side of the limit and this side of the limit, then it was two. Inside himself, ahad is a term used very clearly denoting the ultimate meaning of Tawheed. In just one short sentence, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ Allahu Samad. What is Samad? Samad is someone who looks after himself, in simple terms. It means that no one should look after him. He looks after everything else. Very simple terms. This knowledge has come by the Prophet. Now I want to mention something from Nahjul Balagha. I told all these things to actually explain what Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam is saying about the Prophet. He's saying about the Prophet in these simple sentences, which are reported in Nahjul Balagha. This is when Amirul Mu'mineen was attending the ghusl of the Prophet. He was crying as mentioning these sentences, describing the Prophet while he was doing his ghusl. And of course, you know, while Amirul Mu'minin was attending the ghusl of the Prophet, people were plotting for Khilafah and other things. And Amirul Mu'minin could not ever think that Muslims would leave the body of the Prophet unattended and they would go and talk about politics just immediately after the demise and without attending to the Prophet and giving him the proper funeral and proper burial as he deserved. So while he was doing the ghusl of the Prophet, he was saying, بأبي أنت وأمي, may my father and mother be a sacrifice to you. لقد انقطع بموتك ما لم ينقطع بموت غيرك. With your demise, something was cut off from us. A favor was cut off from us. That it is not cut off with demise of anyone else. It means that you had something, you had some favor. No one else had it. And as you have passed away, that favor is now cut off from us. And that was, of course, the revelation. It was cut off. That type of revelation coming to the Prophet. Now, what are these? مِنَ النُّبُوَّةِ وَالْأَنْبَاءِ وَأَخْبَارِ السَّمَاءِ. The news of the heavens. The anba, the news about the Lord, they are now cut off from us after you have left us. Of course, you might say that Amirul Mu'minin had such a knowledge himself, but his knowledge was inherited. He had inherited it from the Prophet, peace be on him. And when the Prophet passed away, that knowledge did not increase anymore. As long as the Prophet was there, the knowledge increased and increased and increased. But when the Prophet passed away, that was cut off. It was just what he had been inherited to A'imma alayhimus salam. That's why you never could parallel one of A'imma with the Prophet, peace be on him. He is the source, he is the origin, he is everything. And that's why Amirul Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, Ana abdun min abid Muhammad, peace be on him. I am but a servant from among the servants of the Prophet. He is the source of everything that I have. And the Prophet himself used to say, Ana adibullah wa aliyun adibi. I have been taught manners, I have been taught akhlaq by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I have taught it to Ali, peace be on him. So he was the source of everything that our A'imma had. That's why they were so much respectful of the Prophet. I think it is Malik ibn Anas, if I'm not mistaken, mentioning about Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. He says, I used to go and visit him, and I never ever saw him mentioning the name of the Prophet without wuzu. The type of respect that Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq had for the Prophet, because they knew what was the Prophet. We don't know. We mention his name casually. We sometimes, even when we want to talk about him, we talk about in a way that, well, he had some ideas, we have some ideas. In our opinion, this shouldn't be like that. And of course, you know, even if you had said this in the face of the Prophet, Prophet never would have rebuked you. He would have said, yes, you have this opinion, but now listen to my opinion. That was his great character. إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Then he says, خُصِّصْتَ حَتَّى صِرْتَ مُسَلِّيًا عَمَّا سَوَاكَ. You were specialized by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Made specific. خُصِّصْتَ, you were made specific. So specific that you were distinguished from everyone beside you. You were not like Isa alayhi salam. You were not like Ibrahim. This is what the Amirul Mu'minin is saying. You were made specific. In a way you became distinguished from everyone else. And still, وَأُمِّمْتَ حَتَّى صَارَ النَّاسُ فِيكَ سَوَاءً. And you were made so general, so attainable, that everyone who follows you is equal. His relationship to you is equal. I cannot tell you I am closer to the Prophet than you. Prophet is a general bounty, favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to all of us. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have sent you as a mercy for all human beings. So his arm is general for everyone. Although he's distinguished from everyone, but he's general from everyone. Now, can anyone say, I'm closer to the Prophet than you, than anyone else? Yes, they can say, but not because of relationship, not because they are Arabs, not because they are from Quraysh, or anything like that. But whoever follows the Prophet in his practice is closer to him. إِنَّ أَوْلَى النَّاسِ بِإِبْرَاهِيمَ. You know, the Jews felt a close tie with Ibrahim and his descendants, with Musa alayhi salam, with Yaqub, Ishaq and others. They said, we are their descendants. So how come that we could be like other people? We could be equal with other people. We are his descendants. And how come that other people say, okay, we have the right to Ibrahim as you have the right? Now the Quran says, إِنَّ أَوْلَى النَّاسِ بِإِبْرَاهِيمَ لَلَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُ. The closer people to Ibrahim are those who followed him. You can become very close to the Prophet by following him very closely. And you can become very far away from the Prophet by ignoring him, by discarding his practice. So it's all depending on us, whether we want to be close to the Prophet or far away from them. And in the same way, people say, how could we establish a connection or a relationship and a heartfelt relationship with Imam al-Asr, Ajjalallah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif? Okay, it is easy. You follow what the Quran says and what the Prophet says. You become the closest person to the Imam alayhi salam. And you will see that you don't need to look after him. He would look after you. He would come to you. You don't need to go to him. He would come to you. The reason we are far away is because we are far away in practice, in what is in mind, what is in heart. We are far away. But when we get close in this way, then we don't need to go and look around the world for the Imam. Imam is here. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here. The only thing is that here is now filthy. The heart is filthy. How could the Imam or remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could ever come to a filthy place? It is not possible. You have to clean it, you have to purify it before you can have this sort of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with his messenger or with his Imam. This is as simple and as easy as that. So the Prophet is for everyone. Imam al-Asr is for everyone. Like the Prophet, peace be on him, there's no difference. There's no specificity. There's nothing is so special in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they can make a type of good relationship with him or with his messengers or imams. It's only the practice. Now, أُمِّمْتَ حَتَّى صَارَ النَّاسُ فِيكَ سَوَاءً. And then he says, of course, the demise of the Prophet was really, really heartbreaking for Amirul Mu'mineen. Especially he knew that what was going to come about. He knew that the fitan was coming about. Prophet had prophesied about these fitan. In Muharram, just a month before his demise, or 40 days before his demise. This hadith is mentioned by both Sunnis and Shiis. He used to go very much to go to Baqi and to say salam to his ashab who had passed away. And then he used to say, you were lucky that you have passed away. Because قَدْ أَقْبَلَتِ الْفِتَنْ كَقِطَعَ اللَّيْلِ الْمُظْلِمِ. The fitan, the discomfort, the difficult times are approaching like the pieces of dark night, and they are going to cover the Ummah of Islam. And of course Amirul Mu'mineen knew about this. So it says, وَلَوْلَا أَنَّكَ أَمَرْتَ بِالصَّبْرِ. If you had not ordered us to patience, and endurance. وَنَهَيْتَ عَنِ الْجَزَعِ. If you had not prohibited us from doing jaza, from trying all the time for a calamity that come to us, لَأَنْفَدْنَا عَلَيْكَ مَا الشُّؤُونَ. We would have finished with our tears by shedding them all for you. This just shows the grievance that Amirul Mu'mineen was feeling by the demise of the Prophet. And then he says, well, of course, death is something which cannot be driven away from anyone. It would come to all, and the only thing is that we have to be patient by losing you. And he says one thing, بَأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي أُذْكُرْنَا عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ. Remember us while you are with your Lord. وَاجْعَلْنَا فِي بَالِكَ. And put us in your remembrance as well. Put us in your concerns, so that even when you are there, you look after us, as when you were here, you looked after us. Now, to end, I want to mention one thing about the Prophet. There are many verses in the Quran, and there are many different ahadith that prophets, of course, did not want any reward from anyone. The reward was with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He only asked for one thing. قُلْ مَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. I'm not going to ask you any reward for what I'm doing, but the love for my near kins, for my near relatives. Qurba are real near relatives. And then, of course, he explained in another verse, although I say this is a reward I want from you, but still this is for you. قُلْ مَا سَأَلْتُكُم مِّنْ أَجْرٍ فَهُوَ لَكُمْ. Whatever reward I wanted from you, I asked from you, it is for you. I say you have to love my close relatives, my Ahlul Bayt, because it would benefit you. It doesn't benefit me loving them. Now, look what did the Ummah do. I mean, with such a grand, magnanimous Prophet. When we look back in the hindsight, we can realize that he did not really deserve the type of treatment that his Ummah did with those people whom he specifically mentioned and asked the Ummah to be kind to them, to love them. Well, this is something all of us know. But you would see not even one member of his family was saved from cruelty after him. Well, I don't talk about those people who were responsible. That's not a matter. That's not an issue. But when we go to every single member of his family, like Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, like his daughter Fatima, peace be upon him, like Hassan alayhi salam, Al-Hussein alayhi salam, Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, and then other members of his family, for whom he was very much concerned, you would see that not a single member of that family was actually spared from the cruelty shown to them by the Ummah after the Prophet. Well, what would the Ummah expect? Just God forgive us and forgive the Ummah for what they did to his prophets. There is a hadith I conclude with this hadith about two of the most beloved ones of the Prophet, Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein, who were the hadith from Sunni and Shi'i. In all sources it is mentioned. It is very mashhur, very famous, the hadith, that Hassan and Hussein are my two flowers, Rayhanatai min ad-dunya. My two flowers. I love them very much. Husaynun minni wa ana min Hussein. I and Hussein and I are like one soul in two bodies, so to speak. Husaynun minni wa ana min Hussein, like this. Now, one day Imam Hussein alayhi salam paid a visit to his brother, to his elder brother Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. While they were talking, the tears started falling down from Imam Hussein's eyes and cheeks. And Imam Hassan was surprised. He said, "What has happened? Why do you cry?" He said, "I remembered what our grandfather said about you, that my grandson Hassan would be martyred despite all my recommendations. Then Hassan was moved, alayhi salam. He said, my martyrdom is nothing. It is just a poison I will be given, and I will die in that way. But I'm very much concerned about you, Hussein, which 30,000 men would surround you, all of them claiming that they are members of the ummah of our grandfather, and they would try to kill you. They would do their best to harm you in this way. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ الْعَلِيِّ الْعَظِيمِ وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. I ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to favor us on this night, and because of the love that He has for His Prophet, to favor us with a practice, with a manner with which He is Himself and His Prophet and the A'immah are pleased. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the courage to leave the trivial things of this world and stick to what remains for us and follow the footsteps of the Prophet. وَصَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِهِ الطَّاهِرِينَ.